Welcome back, everybody. This is part 4 and the final episode of my series on picking a data center. And if you haven't seen part 1 through 3, I will put a link up here, I think it is, yeah, so that you can take a look at those. I'll give you a second to get all caught up. All good? Okay, here we go. So last time we talked about cooling delivery systems, fire suppression systems, and network. So let's jump in and start with security. And then we're going to cover some add-ons that you can look for. And finally, we're going to talk about negotiating a contract. So stick around with me till the end because I'll go over some important points on that. So when you're picking a facility, it's important to know what your security requirements are. Do you have top secret information that you are working with that you will need like a SCIF for, a sensitive compartmentalized information facility? You don't have to sell weapons to fall under ITAR requirements either. That's the International Traffic and Arms Regulation rules, where you may need a facility that restricts access for foreign nationals. So there's all sorts of different types of security, compliance, and regulatory things that you need to look for and that you need to understand. Now, there are facilities that specialize in dealing with sensitive and high security regulatory and compliance environments. Now, regardless of whether you have more complex security requirements, security is a key component of data center facilities from both a physical and cybersecurity perspective. So when you're looking at the security of a facility, the goal is to delay and detect. Given enough time, any facility can be breached. The goal with physical security is to delay an intruder enough to detect and to stop them. Facilities generally take a layered perimeter approach. So like a typical scenario could be there are gates to the parking lot and barriers between the parking lot and the facility to prevent vehicular attacks. Now, once you get to the door, there should be multi-factor authentication to just get in, a man trap, and security guard to pass into the lobby of the facility. Then there should be another point of authentication and probably a man trap as well to get into the data center. Then another point of authentication to get into your cage or cabinet or room. Take a look at how many layers their security architecture has. Sometimes you will see steel-lined walls to protect the facility. Check to see how the tenants are separated from each other to make sure that you're okay with the security there. Now, doors in the facility will often have specialized locking systems and zero torque handles to prevent people from forcing entry and breaking the locks. My favorite locks were the Medico locks, especially when you don't have master keys with them, because master keys tend to make things a little less secure. Doors are typically hardened. They're steel and secured with multiple locking systems, not just the door lock, but maybe magnetic locks or strike plates and things like that. And also, these doors are always alarmed and covered by cameras. Now, check out the man traps and how they allow access into the facility. There should be no tailgating allowed. That's following another person in. Every person should be required to badge in and to badge out as well. Typically, if someone tailgates and doesn't badge at every checkpoint along the way, their access should be turned off. Now, one thing to note, if you remember from the fire suppression section, fire safety trumps everything. This means that with all the security measures that were put in place, when the fire alarms go off, the doors open up. There are requirements to provide safe egress, and the fire department doesn't want to get their people killed going into a dangerous building to rescue tech workers. So they take this stuff very seriously. So this means that every path from the inside to the outside can be opened. This is why all the doors must be alarmed. So much of security is about the policies and procedures. Check that the staff is checking IDs, requiring approvals to let vendors in, validating users with their date of birth and checking IDs and state-issued IDs, and that they're not letting anybody in who hasn't gone through those processes. When I was in the data center business, we would have customers that would hire outside security firms to try to social engineer the security desk for access to the facility. They would come in and they would scream, "I'm the CTO of such and such company. You got to let me in. This is my facility." And you must have staff that's trained to handle that stuff. They should not be susceptible to these attacks. They should also have a process to rapidly remove access if needed, and a clear process and approval chain for adding access. So it should be a lot easier to revoke access than it is to add access, because revoking access is a time-critical thing, whereas typically approving access is not. Access should only be granted to the areas of the facility that are required by that individual. They should also perform a regular access audit and remove individuals who should no longer have access. Now, some facilities have armed guards, but that is less frequent, although I have seen facilities that have guards with automatic weapons walking around on catwalks patrolling, which is a little bit creepy. You should see if they have staff that regularly patrols the building as well. Sometimes walking the facility is the best way to secure it. And this is not just for security. Sometimes you can smell things like a burning fan before the smoke detector detects it, or you can see a little water leak before it hits the sensors. So that's an important part. There should also be a robust camera system. They should have cameras outside the facility that can cover the entire perimeter around the facility. They should have complete coverage inside the facility as well. And you should make sure that there's a person dedicated to monitoring those cameras at all times. Now, ideally, you should be able to get access to these camera feeds for your equipment as well. Check what the retention is for storing camera footage. Oftentimes, you don't notice a breach right away, and you will need to go back in time to find the relevant footage. Now, this is also true of all the access logs. Check what the retention policies are and make sure you have access to any logs that are relevant to access regarding your equipment. Now, security can be frustrating, especially when you're used to managing your own. Security is always a balance between security and flexibility. And if done right, you will have a reasonable amount of flexibility without sacrificing security. But it's important to understand the rules so you don't run into problems. Make sure you feel comfortable with the facility's security practices, their staff training, and the staff's implementation of those practices. Now, before I get into negotiating your contract, I want to talk about some add-on services that you will find at many facilities. Most of these facilities will offer a managed hand service. This is staff that will enter your area and perform basic tasks at your direction. They're usually not highly skilled professionals, but they can power cycle devices, they can rack and unrack equipment for you. Now, some facilities will offer different tiers of managed hands at different price points. Like they may have CCIEs available to help you with networking issues, for example. But that is not common across all facilities. More sophisticated facilities will also have people on hand to manage all the HVAC systems, electricians, all of that stuff as well. But these are people that are going to come in and help you manage your gear. Check the shipping policies. Many facilities charge fees for handling shipments and storing shipments. Find out what their secured storage pricing is and what their policies are. Now, most facilities will also have shared build rooms where you can unbox and set up gear before taking it into your area. This way you don't have to drag all the boxes and all the clutter into your facility. The policies around how these rooms are used varies, so know what the rules are. Depending on what your relationship is with the staff in the facility, they will help you out more with some of these things if you are in good standing with them. So treat them well. Now, most facilities offer access to their monitoring systems as well. Now, this can include things like security logs and camera feeds, but it can also provide you with information about electrical and cooling systems relevant to your equipment. Now, some facilities will offer different managed services, from backup managed services to storage managed services to network managed services as well. And some of them will also help you with move migration services, although they typically job this out. And it's good to know all of the services they offer because many of the facilities will be willing to add these things in to sweeten a deal. So let's talk about some of the things to look for when you put a contract together with these facilities. Now, most will push you to take on long contracts. They'll look for 5, 7, 10 years even. And they will put heavier discounts on these longer terms. Now, this is almost always a bad deal. I would look at doing a short 3-year deal with options for extensions. This way you get the best of both worlds. You have a shorter term on your lease and you have options on additional years. But the reality of the business is that the longer they keep a tenant, the more money they make. For a facility, they may not break even on year 1 or even year 2, so they always push for longer terms. Now, for the customer, you need to keep in mind that facilities age and newer technologies become available. And also, your business needs may change. Do you know where you will be in 5 years or what your requirements will be? Do you even know what they will be in a year? Costs almost always go down. So when you hit the end of your term, you will be in a better place to negotiate a deal. And it's probably going to be a better deal than if you took the longer term contract. And they will be incentivized to keep you in your space. So keep that in mind. Now, one thing that you will often see in a contract is an escalator clause. This is where the price increases by a certain percentage every year. Now, this is definitely something that you can leverage in the negotiations. They will often reduce or eliminate this escalation fee to get a deal done. Now, think about additional services that we talked about before that they can throw in to sweeten your deal. Oftentimes, they will just toss some of this stuff in for free. Now, we discussed cross-connects in a previous video. Cross-connects are another place where you can find some savings in a negotiation. Have a certain amount of cross-connects included in your contract. They'll usually toss some in. Now, another thing to consider is negotiating an abatement. Now, abatement is basically a period of time where you don't pay rent. If you have a period of time over which you're going to be moving into your new facility, this can really help you prevent paying twice, paying for the facility you're in and paying for the facility you're moving to. And I have seen abatements from a month all the way up to a year or more even, depending on what the market is like and what the term of your lease is. When it's a buyer's market like we are in now, they will do a lot for you. Remember that an empty facility costs them money. Leasing space, even below cost, can be a good option for them as it can reduce the amount of bleed they're going through. Just be prepared for a bit of tougher negotiation when you renew and the facility is full. And this is why new facilities that are empty can be great sources for a great deal because you're getting a new modern facility and they're incentivized to get you in there. When you're negotiating these contracts, a lot of times you hear talk about power rates and things like that. But the power costs from a provider are a minuscule number in light of the equipment and build costs. And quite frankly, it's more the build costs than the equipment costs even because oftentimes to install the equipment, it costs more money than the equipment itself. And those are the real costs that they're trying to recoup. Now, for smaller footprints, you'll often negotiate for cabinets and circuits. For larger facilities, however, you will probably be negotiating for square footage and aggregate power. Now, when buying your power in bulk, make sure you really understand what your requirements are. The facility will have to provision a certain amount of power for you, and whatever they provision for you is power that they can't use for someone else. Actual physical space and power provisioning is a hard cost for them, so they'll be less flexible on some of these items. Now, you can also look to structure deals that grow with you over time. And I've seen deals where there is even an underutilization refund if the total amount of power isn't used over the course of a month. This is usually a small percentage of the fee, but every little bit helps. Now, make sure you consider things like non-performance in your contract as well. Also, another thing to seek to add in is business downturn clauses. If something unfortunate happens to your business and you need to downsize, you don't want to be stuck with a contract that is too much for you to carry. Consider what your future state could look like. If you anticipate growing your footprint, you can look to reserve contiguous space. Now, typically this is done in a couple of ways. You can either pay a small monthly fee to hold the space for you, or you can negotiate for a first right of refusal, where if someone expresses an interest in leasing the space that you have your eye on, you have the option to take it first. But usually it's under the terms of that negotiation. Lastly, understand what the SLAs are. Typically, the penalties for the provider are basically useless. You can get a refund for the cost of the power at market rates for the period of time that you were down. You know, the $50 that you're going to get back in SLA charges is not going to offset the costs of the thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars that an actual outage will cost you. But make sure if there are multiple outages, you can terminate your contract for non-performance. Now, some facilities do offer more robust SLAs though, so understand what that looks like. Now, sometimes you will encounter facilities that have E&O policies or errors and omissions policies underwritten by actual insurers that will pay out more substantial amounts when the provider fails to deliver the service. Some of these E&O policies can be substantial, but understand what all the conditions are for them. And also understand that probably the first time they call that in is the last time they will be calling that policy in. Now, keep in mind what I said about a buyer's market. It's better for them to sell something than to sell nothing, because every day they are open, it costs them money. Be reasonable though. The best contracts are where everyone benefits. And once you are in a facility, you are just as invested in them staying in business as they are. Look for a good partner. In the real estate business, they often say you want a great location, you want a great facility, and you want a great landlord. Make sure you're comfortable with your landlord here, because that is a really important piece to a smooth operating facility. Now, if there's anything around data center you want me to do a deeper dive on, I covered a ton of stuff in this 4-part series. Let me know in the comments and I'll try and tackle it. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, hit like, please subscribe. That really helps me out. And click on the bell icon for notifications when I post new content. And I will see you in the next video.